Yes, hello. My name is George Seiler, and we're here at the Mason-Dixon Historical Society Steam Show Roundup at the Westminster Farm Museum. This is a typical old engine that they would have to run a sawmill or some big, large factory operation back in the 1910s to 1930s. We have a lot of engines. We have a lot of tractors here today. We have an operating sawmill to saw up trees for making boards. We have a blacksmith shop. Now let's take a look at some of the nice old engines we have here.
This particular engine had been used for hauling apples into Winchester, Virginia from the apple fields to the Musselman's plant. A lot of them had got a lot of use with plowing out west, and in the eastern states they power sawmills and threshing outfits, basically. Predominantly this thing was more of a road locomotive hauling several wagons of apples into, like I said, into the Musselman's plant.
This is my Hitin. This engine. It's belted off to a water pump over here, and we'll start it up, and you can hear the hit and miss feature and watch it run. It was an engine design that was popular back in the 1920s, and it was designed so that it would fire and then it would coast for a while until it slowed down. Then it would fire again to get the speed back up. And that's how they controlled the speed of this type of engine. It's going through its cycle of a hit and miss cycle. You can hear it fire, then it coasts a little bit, it coasts a little bit, and then it fires again. That's how it got its name, hit and miss engine. If you want to look at it, this is water in a tank to cool it off. It cools by evaporation. You can see most of the moving parts. This is a centrifugal governor. You can see the weights coming in and out to control the speed. That tells it when it needs to fire. When the weights fall in, it tells it to fire. This is called a drip oiler. It drops oil down onto the piston. That's how the piston gets lubricated. This is the intake valve. That's the exhaust valve. You'll notice there's no rocker arm on the intake valve. On the intake stroke, it sucks itself in against the spring. The exhaust valve, it keeps it open while it's coasting in between firing, so there's no compression while it's coasting. This is a high voltage spark plug and a magneto that provides the high voltage for the spark plug. There was a lot of different types of ignition back in these days. This was just one of several types of ignition. The spark plug type high voltage has survived over the years. The others did not. This is where the air goes in. This controls the gas. And this little plate is the choke on your lawnmower. It has a choke too. It's a very simple carburetor. Nothing much to it. Yeah, this is just an old water pump that I rescued from a flea market. I fixed it up, and it's pumping water. And it was very popular to have a water pump on the farm to put water in the barn for animals. And eventually they would get water into the house, but the animals always got it first. This is another old engine from the turn of the century into the 20s and 30s. This happens to be a throttle-governed engine, which fires all the time. And the throttle controls the speed. You can see the steam coming out of the hopper on top. That's the evaporation of the cooling water on top. That's what keeps the engine cooled. That's basically the radiator. This is another throttle-governed engine. This one has a low-voltage ignition system where the points are inside the cylinder head, which is a style that was never adapted for a commercial today. That's cooling water running down over the screen, and the air flowing through it cools the water off to cool the engine. That's an open-air radiator. It's a little smaller, but it did a lot of work in its day. It probably ran maybe a small sawmill or something of that nature. Farmers that could afford one would get an engine like this to power their equipment on the farm, like corn shellers and corn grinders to make feed for the animals. Most of them were on wheels like this. They could wheel it up to the house and run the washing machine and the butter churn and ice cream maker and all the good stuff. That one is tuned up very well. It has a very long coast period. You can hear it. It just fires, and then when it slows down a little bit, then it fires again. Yeah. This is an engine-powered corn sheller. It takes the kernels of corn off the cob, separates them, and dumps them in the bucket. And the corn cobs slide down the little chute and fall out the end to keep them separated. This is a corn grinder. Once the corn is taken off the cob, you put it in here, and this grinds it up to make feed for the chickens or animals or different sizes. You can make it real fine to make cornmeal or chicken feed, or it's all adjustable on how coarse the grind is. We're at the sawmill. It's being operated by a steam engine right now. Steam traction engine, actually. And they're belting off to run the sawmill. It saws up logs. They use them to make houses, barns, and outbuildings on the farm. We have several logs here that people have brought in to saw up. The carriage travels the log back and forth across the log, and it gets sawed off and the pieces fall off on the side. There'll be somebody here to pick up the boards as they come off. They have to get the log squared up before they make it into boards. You have to run it fast enough so that the log goes through across the saw fast enough that the saw blade doesn't heat up. If it heats up too much, it'll warp the saw blade. The stuff that comes off the outside edges with the bark still on it, they cut up and use it for firewood. In the old days, they would use it in the wood stove in the houses. They would saw it up into pieces and use it. They'd truck it into the farmer's house, and he would use it as firewood in the family wood stove for cooking their meals on. There's a big sawdust pit on the other side there where all the sawdust falls down, and they gather that up later for mulch and cattle beds and stuff. It's free if you want some.